The Grand Athenaeum of Xylos was, by galactic consensus, the most important building on the most important moon orbiting the most important gas giant in the most important quadrant of the civilized spiral arm. It was a structure of pure, spun logic, its crystalline spires humming with the stored knowledge of 1,000 species. Within its sterile, ozone-scented halls, facts were dissected, truths were categorized, and the universe was neatly filed away into manageable data slates. Today, the Athenaeum was focused on a single, particularly unmanageable fact, a creature designated Specimen 734. Hyproctor Zorlag, a being whose form resembled a praying mantis sculpted from smoky quartz, adjusted one of his multifaceted eyes to focus on the containment chamber's primary display. His thoughts moved like clockwork, precise and orderly. Beside him stood Blade Master Cthar of the Draxian hegemony, a creature who was Zorlag's temperamental opposite. Cthar was a mountain of corded muscle and scaled hide, his reptilian head, with its crown of bony spurs, held high with the casual arrogance of a species that had never once been prey. He didn't look at the display. He felt the vibrations of the thing in the chamber through the soles of his armored boots. Energy readings are stable, but the subject's biosignatures are agitated, Zorlag chirped, his voice a series of perfectly modulated clicks and whistles. Its adrenal analog is spiking at a level that would liquefy the internal organs of a lesser organism. Truly a magnificent example of predatory evolution. Cthar let out a low rumble, a sound like stones grinding together deep underground. It has a warrior's spirit. I can feel its rage. It yearns for battle, for the rending of flesh and the splintering of bone. He flexed his three-fingered claws, each tipped with a blade of natural obsidian. It is a shame, we must simply observe. To face such a beast in the honor pits would be a tale worthy of a death saga. The creature in question was a nightmare given form. It was a product of a rogue planetoid, a world of crushing gravity and perpetual twilight that had drifted into Federation space. The thing was immense, easily the size of a cargo shuttle. It moved on 8 powerful, chitin-plated legs, each ending in a scythe-like talon that carved deep grooves into the reinforced durasteel floor of its enclosure. Its body was a fortress of overlapping armor, and from its front writhed a nest of razor-sharp mandibles surrounding a maw that dripped a neurotoxic venom so potent that a single drop could paralyze a mature Groxnot. They called it the Reaper of Xylos in the data slates. Patience, Blade Master. Zorlag clicked, a hint of academic condescension in his tone. Raw aggression is a tool, not a solution. We are here to understand its lethality, to quantify its threat, not to engage in primitive bloodsport. The data we collect today will allow us to design countermeasures that will protect countless lives across the Federation. Words and numbers. Cthar grunted, his slit-pupiled eyes still fixed on the beast. A true warrior learns by the testing of his blade, not by staring at glowing screens. All your data will not save you if that field fails, Proctor. Zorlag was about to issue a sharp, logical retort about the containment field's triple redundancy and its rating to withstand a direct tactical plasma strike, but he was interrupted by the soft hiss of the observation deck's entrance portal. He swiveled his crystalline head, his annoyance circuits firing. The interruption was, as he had suspected, the human. Jake ambled onto the deck. That was the only word for it. Ambled. He moved with a kind of relaxed, inefficient gait that drove Zorlag's orderly mind into a state of low-grade fury. The human was an utter contradiction to the crisp, purposeful environment of the Athenaeum. He was soft. His skin was pale and unarmored. His clothes were made of flimsy woven fibers in a dull blue color, and he possessed no visible natural weapons whatsoever. No claws, no fangs, no carapace. He was, by every conceivable metric Zorlag had ever studied, a prey animal. A slow, weak, ridiculously fragile prey animal. He was also holding a ceramic mug. It was white, with a chip on the rim, and it had strange symbols on it that read world's okayest employee. The mug was currently steaming, emitting an aroma of roasted vegetable matter that was both confusing and unpleasant. "Morning, gentlemen," Jake said, his voice maddeningly casual. "Am I late? The sonic cleanser in my quarters is on the fritz again. Had to do the teeth the old-fashioned way. Bit of a workout." Cthar snorted, a plume of hot air jetting from his nostrils. Human, you are present. That is sufficient. The dismissal was palpable. The Blade Master turned his attention back to the Reaper, clearly indicating that the human was less interesting than the Durasteel wall. Zorlag was, by treaty, obligated to be more diplomatic. Greetings, Liaison Jake. Your presence is noted. We are about to begin the primary behavioral analysis of Specimen 734. I must insist that you remain behind the designated safety perimeter. He gestured with a delicate, needle-like forelimb to a yellow line painted on the floor, a considerable distance from the main observation window. Your species' fragility is well documented. Jake smiled, a gesture that involved baring his ridiculously blunt teeth. It was meant to be friendly, but to most species, it looked like a failed threat display. No worries, Proctor. Wouldn't want to get any of this thing on my pants. There knew he took a long sip from his mug, making a soft, appreciative sound. This was the great, baffling mystery of humanity. They were everywhere. Some obscure, ancient treaty had granted them liaison status on almost every major Federation council, committee, and research station. Nobody quite remembered why. The prevailing theory was that it had been a clerical error, or perhaps a joke. Humans were seen as a galactic charity case, a species that had somehow stumbled into space travel without any of the necessary evolutionary advantages. They were slow, weak, and lived on a planet so ridiculously placid and nurturing that it had left them utterly unprepared for the harsh realities of the cosmos. Their world, Earth, was classified as a Class 2 garden planet. Mild gravity, stable atmosphere, docile biosphere. A planetary kindergarten. It was why their presence was tolerated. They were harmless. A pet species, almost. Amusing in their own primitive way, but ultimately irrelevant. We are initiating the simulation, Zorlag announced, turning back to his console. He tapped a series of glowing glyphs, releasing sensory stimuli. We will begin with a basic prayer-response test. A simulated herd of Garlanian hover gazelles. Inside the chamber, holographic projectors shimmered to life. A herd of graceful, six-legged creatures appeared, moving with simulated panic. The Reaper, which had been pacing restlessly, froze. Its eyeless head, bristling with sensory antennae, swiveled towards the light constructs. For a moment, it was still. Then, it exploded into motion. It was not a charge, it was a deletion. The creature moved faster than Zorlag's optical sensors could comfortably track. It was a blur of black chitin and silver talons. It didn't just attack the holograms. It seemed to erase them from existence, its claws and mandibles tearing through the photons as if they were solid matter. In seconds, the tranquil holographic scene was replaced by a vortex of simulated gore and pure, unadulterated violence. The chamber echoed with the sound of its screeching, a noise like a starship's hull being torn apart. Incredible, Zorlag murmured, his manipulators flying across the data slate, recording everything. The speed it's a full 12% faster than our initial projections. And the savagery, it exhibits no wasted motion. Pure, predatory efficiency. Kthar's deep rumble was one of pure, unadulterated approval. A glorious slaughter. See how it moves. It is a dance of death. It feels the rhythm of the kill in its very soul. This is what it means to be a predator. He glanced over at Jake, a sneer forming on his reptilian lips, fully expecting to see the human trembling, or perhaps voiding its bladder, as some of the softer species were prone to do in the face of such violence. But Jake wasn't trembling. He was leaning against the railing, just inside the yellow line Zorlag had indicated, one ankle crossed over the other. He took another slow sip from his mug. His expression wasn't one of terror. It wasn't even one of awe. It was mild boredom. He looked like a man waiting for his toast to pop. This was wrong. This was a deviation from all known behavioral models for soft-skinned prey species. Fear was the correct, the logical response. The human's placidity was an anomaly, a piece of data that didn't fit. Human, Kthar growled, his voice low and dangerous. Does this display not impress you? Jake lowered his mug and looked from the rampaging, screeching death machine in the chamber to the 7-foot-tall lizard warrior beside him. He shrugged. It's all right, I guess. A little clumsy on the turns. Tends to overcommit on the lunges. Leaves its flank wide open. Silence descended upon the observation deck, a silence so profound that the hum of the station's life support sounded like a roaring engine. Zorlag stopped inputting data. Thar slowly turned his entire body to face the human, his eyes narrowed to fiery slits. Clumsy, Thar repeated, the word dripping with venomous disbelief. Yeah, Jake said, nodding. See there? He pointed with his mug. When it did that spinning/thing, its rear left leg lifted completely off the ground. Big balance issue. If one of those gazelle holograms had been real and had, say, a friend with a sharpened stick, it could have just jabbed it right in the soft spot under the third abdominal plate. Game over. Zorlag's crystalline mind tried to process this. Sharpened stick? Abdominal plate? The human was speaking nonsense, and yet he was doing so with an air of absolute, unassailable authority. He was critiquing the combat performance of one of the deadliest creatures ever documented, as if he were judging a child's dance recital. Your assessment is illogical. Zorlag finally managed to click out. The creature is a perfect killing machine. Its biology is flawless. Nothing's flawless, Proctor, Jake said cheerfully. My Uncle Bill used to say that. Of course, he also used to try and fix the fusion blender with a butter knife, so maybe he's not the best source. Before either of the aliens could demand a translation for Uncle Bill or butter knife, a jarring klaxon suddenly blared through the station. Red emergency lights bathed the deck in a hellish glow. An automated, synthesized voice began to chant a calm but terrifying mantra. Warning. Containment field fluctuation detected. All personnel evacuate to designated safe zones. Warning. Zorlag spun back to his console. The data streams had turned from neat columns of black and green into a cascading waterfall of crimson error messages. Impossible. The power conduits are shielded. The emitters have triple backups. Inside the chamber, the Reaper stopped its rampage. It sensed the change. The shimmering wall of energy that held it captive was flickering, wavering like a heat haze. It gathered its immense body, its 8 legs coiling like springs. With a shriek that vibrated through the very deck plating, it launched itself at the weakening barrier. The impact was catastrophic. The sound was a deafening crack, like a glacier calving in half. The containment field, the pinnacle of Federation technology, exploded in a shower of sapphire-colored sparks. The Reaper of Xylos, Specimen 734, the perfect killing machine, was free. Panic was a cold, sharp thing. Zorlag's logical mind dissolved into a frantic cascade of survival imperatives. His quartz-like limbs froze, his processors overwhelmed by the sheer, immediate finality of the situation. They were trapped. The blast had fused the deck's exit portal shut. There was no escape. Thar, however, reacted as a warrior should. With a roar that almost matched the Reaper's, he ignited his energy glaive. The twin blades of crackling plasma hissed to life, casting a ghostly blue light on his snarling face. He planted his feet, a living statue of defiance. For the honor of the hegemony, for the glory of the kill, I will die a warrior's death. He was magnificent. He was brave. He was also, almost certainly, about to be turned into a thin paste. The Reaper landed on the observation deck, its talons screeching on the metal. It was even bigger up close. It towered over them, a living mountain of rage and death. Its mandibles clicked and gnashed, dripping venom that sizzled as it hit the floor. It fixed its sensory cluster on the nearest, brightest target, Thar and his glowing glaive. It lowered its head, preparing to charge. And then, a sound cut through the chaos. Clink. It was the sound of a ceramic mug being placed gently on a metal console. Both Thar and the Reaper paused, momentarily distracted. They turned to look at the source of the noise. It was Jake. The human had placed his mug down with deliberate care. He stretched his arms over his head, producing a series of soft popping sounds from his spine. He let out a long, weary sigh, the kind of sigh a man makes when he realizes he has to mow the lawn on his day off. He looked at the towering, venom-dripping, multi-ton engine of destruction that was about to obliterate them all. He put his hands on his hips, and he said, in a voice of profound disappointment, "Oh, for crying out loud. Fluffy, is that you?" Every being on the deck, organic and monstrous, froze. Thar's battle cry died in his throat. Zorlag's panic circuits shorted out. The Reaper tilted its head. It was a gesture of canine confusion, a movement so utterly at odds with its terrifying appearance that it broke reality. The human, Jake, started walking forward, not away from the monster, towards it. "Bad Fluffy," he said, his voice taking on the chiding tone of a parent scolding a toddler. "Bad. Get down from there. You know you're not allowed on the observation deck. What have I told you about breaking the expensive alien technology?" He didn't stop walking. He walked right past the stunned, glaive-wielding Draxian warrior. He walked right up to the Reaper of Xylos. The monster, which had been seconds from charging, now seemed utterly befuddled. It lowered its head further, its sensory antennae twitching. It let out a noise. It wasn't a death shriek. It was a high-pitched, questioning chirp. Jake reached the creature and, to the absolute horror of Zorlag and Kthar, he reached out and patted one of its massive, armored forelegs. Yeah, I missed you too, buddy," he said soothingly. "But you really made a mess. Look at this place. The proctor is going to have a fit." The human then did something that would be forever burned into the memory cores of every witness. He reached up, his soft, unarmored fingers moving with practiced ease, and found a spot just behind the creature's primary mandible cluster, a spot hidden beneath a thick plate of chitin. He began to scratch. The effect was instantaneous. The Reaper of Xylos, the apex predator from a nightmare world, the perfect killing machine, shuddered. Its murderous tension evaporated. Its nest of razor-sharp mandibles went slack. A deep, rhythmic sound began to emanate from its chest, a rumbling purr that vibrated through the deck. And then, the entire, terrifying creature collapsed. It flopped onto its side with a heavy thud, its 8 legs twitching in contentment. One of its rear appendages, a limb tipped with a talon that could shear through a starship hull, began to thump rhythmically against the floor. Thump, 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 like a happy dog. An absolute, deafening, universe-altering silence fell upon the observation deck. It was broken only by the monster's happy gurgling and the rhythmic thumping of its tail talon. Kthar's energy glaive sputtered and died, clattering from his nerveless fingers to the floor. Zorlag's multifaceted eyes, all of them, were fixed on the scene, trying to reconcile the data with reality and failing spectacularly. Jake, oblivious to the existential crises he had just triggered, was now kneeling, checking the creature, Fluffy, for injuries. "Looks like you got a little singed on the way through the field, huh, boy? We'll get some ointment for that." It was Zorlag who finally found the processing power to form a coherent sound. "What, by the first algorithm, was that?" he stammered, his voice distorted with static. Jake looked up from his ministrations. He seemed surprised to see them still standing there, paralyzed. "Oh, him." He gestured casually at the purring monstrosity. "That's Fluffy. He's a barnstrider. He used to live in my barn, back on Earth." Kthar took a stumbling step back, his warrior's pride completely and utterly shattered. "Barn? Strider? Yeah," Jake said, standing up and dusting off his pants. "They're great for pest control. Keep the mega-rodents out of the grain silos. They're a bit territorial, and they shed like crazy in the spring, but mostly they're just big, dumb cats." He looked around at the wrecked observation deck, the shattered containment field, the scorch marks on the walls. "He must have stowed away on the supply freighter I came in on. He's always been a curious one. I guess he got out of the cargo bay and found his way up here." Zorlag's mind was a maelstrom of conflicting information. This apex predator that had scored higher on every lethality index than any creature on record, was a pest control animal. A pet. A barn cat. But, its designation, it was captured on Xylos 9, a rogue planetoid of extreme hostility. The proctor chirped, his logic circuits screaming for an answer that made sense. Jake's face broke into a wide grin. "Oh, you mean that rock with all the gravity squids and the acid rain? Yeah, that's not where he's from. That's where my freighter crashed." The silence returned, heavier and more profound than before. "You crashed on Xylos 9? Kthar whispered, the words sounding like a blasphemy. "No one survived on Xylos 9. The survey drone sent there had lasted an average of 17 minutes. "Yeah, bit of a rough landing," Jake said, rubbing the back of his neck. "Nav computer went on the fritz. Had to spend a couple of weeks there waiting for rescue. Fluffy here was a real champ. Hunted down a bunch of those big, armored slug things for us to eat. Tasted a bit like chicken, if you barbecue them right. This was the point where Blade Master Kthar's brain simply gave up. He slowly, deliberately, sat down on the floor. His mind, which was built for the simple, honorable calculus of battle, could not compute a universe in which a soft, weak-looking creature survived for 2 weeks on a planet that should have killed him in 2 minutes, all while domesticating the local wildlife and holding a barbecue. Zorlag, however, was an intellectual. His mind, though reeling, was desperately seeking a framework, a paradigm, to contain this new, terrifying information. Liaison Jake, he began, his voice trembling slightly. The Galactic Codex classifies your homeworld, Earth, as a Class 2 garden planet, a world of minimal environmental threat. How is it possible that a creature like Fluffy originates from such a paradise? Jake let out a short, sharp laugh. It was not a friendly sound. It was a sound of pure, unadulterated irony. A Class 2 garden planet? Oh wow, is that what you guys think? That's hilarious. He leaned back against the console, crossing his arms. The casual, slightly goofy human was gone. In his place was something else. Something ancient and knowing and deeply, deeply dangerous. Proctor, Blade Master, he said, his voice low and steady. You've got it all backward. You think we're weak because our world is safe. The truth is, you think our world is safe because you've only ever met the things we let off-world. You've met our diplomats, our traders, our poodles, and our house cats. You've never seen what we keep at home. He gestured to the purring barn strider. This big guy, on the planetary threat index back home, he barely registers. He's a farm animal. Annoying, sure. He'll occasionally eat a cyber sheep or knock over a fence. But he's not what we classify as dangerous. Dangerous is a grizzly bear. That's a 10-foot-tall wall of muscle, claws, and teeth that can outrun a ground speeder and survives by eating things that are also made of muscle, claws, and teeth. Dangerous is a great white shark, a literal torpedo of evolutionary perfection that has been killing things in our oceans since before your ancestors learned to use tools. He started pacing now, his voice gaining intensity. You think your worlds are tough? Our world is trying to kill us, constantly, in 1,000 different, spectacularly creative ways. We have tiny insects that can kill you with a single bite. We have plants that will poison you if you touch them. We have snakes whose venom can dissolve your tissues from the inside out. We have weather that can freeze you solid, boil you alive, flatten your cities with wind, or drown them in water. We have volcanoes that can blot out the sun and tectonic plates that try to shake our civilizations apart. We have bacteria and viruses, microscopic predators that are constantly evolving new ways to wipe us out. Our entire planet is a death trap. Zorlag and Kthar stared, mouths agape. Kthar's people, the Draxians, prided themselves on living on a harsh desert world. But he was beginning to realize that their definition of harsh was laughably inadequate. And what do? Jake continued, a wild look in his eyes. How do we respond to this constant, unrelenting hostility? We go on vacation there. We call it camping. We climb the highest, most inhospitable mountains for fun. We strap planks of wood to our feet and slide down them at lethal speeds. We jump out of flying vehicles with nothing but a sheet of fabric to save us. We swim in oceans filled with things that want to eat us. We treat survival as a recreational activity. He stopped and looked directly at Zorlag. You want to know why I wasn't scared of your Reaper? Proctor, I once had to fight a raccoon for a half-eaten sandwich. And I lost. A raccoon. It's a small, furry mammal that looks like a tiny bandit and lives by eating garbage. And it was meaner and more determined than your perfect killing machine here. He then turned to Kthar. Blade Master, you value strength, honor, the glory of the kill. I respect that. But on my world, we have a thing called persistence hunting. Our ancestors, who were even softer and weaker than I am, would hunt creatures that were bigger, stronger, and faster than them. They couldn't win in a straight fight. So they didn't. They just followed them. They would jog for hours, for days. They would track their prey, never letting it rest, never letting it recover, until the great, powerful beast collapsed from sheer exhaustion. Then, they would walk up and kill it with a sharpened rock tied to a stick. We don't just outfight our enemies, Blade Master. We outlast them. We outstubborn them. We are the masters of attrition. We will simply refuse to die until our opponent does it first out of sheer annoyance. He took a deep breath, the lecture seemingly finished. He walked back over to his mug and picked it up. Being underestimated is our single greatest strategic advantage. Every species in this galaxy looks at us and sees a soft, squishy, harmless primate from a paradise world. They see our empathy, our cooperation, our obsessive need to pet fluffy things, and they see it as weakness. They never realize that those are the very things that let us conquer a planet that should have killed us 1,000,000 years ago. Our empathy lets us build teams. Our cooperation lets us build civilizations. And our need to pet fluffy things, he glanced fondly at the snoozing Fluffy, lets us turn monsters into allies. Zorlag's crystalline mind finally put the pieces together. The treaty, the liaison program. It wasn't a mistake. It wasn't a joke. It was an act of galactic mercy. Not for humanity, but by humanity. They weren't being protected. Everyone else was. It was a warning. A quiet, polite, unassuming warning that said, "We are here. We are watching. And for your own sake, be nice." Kthar slowly got to his feet. He looked at Jake, not as a superior warrior looking at a lesser being, but as a novice looking at a grandmaster. The human wasn't a prey animal. He wasn't even a predator. He was something else entirely. He was a survivor, an ambassador from a world of monsters, and quite possibly the most dangerous thing on it. Jake took a final sip from his mug, which must have been cold by now. "Well," he said, his casual demeanor returning as if it had never left. "I guess I have to call my wife. She's going to be so mad he got out again. Now, who here knows how to fix a transphasic containment field? This is going to be way more annoying than putting together that IKEA bookshelf." And in the stunned silence that followed, Zorlag and Kthar could only stare, their minds grappling with the terrifying, universe-shattering implications of what an IKEA bookshelf must be.